Hello and welcome to CRJ 113, Chapter 4, Parties to Crime. In Chapter 4, we start getting into specific crimes now, and we're really going to see how important it is to understand the actus reus and mens rea, and how we cannot have a crime if one of them is missing. In fact, as we've learned with all elements of crime, if one element is missing, no matter what the element is, then the crime did not happen. But we'll spend most of our time looking into the actus reus and the mens rea of crimes. So, what is an accomplice? And that's what really this chapter is about. Parties to crimes, it's about accomplices. And an accomplice is someone who knowingly and willingly assists another in the commission of a crime. In that definition, we can see the mens rea and we can see the actus reus. So at this point, I want you just to read that and see if you can figure out what is the mens rea to be an accomplice and what is the actus reus. And if you can do that at this point, you are way ahead of the game. If you can't do it yet, don't stress, don't worry about it. That's what this class is for, and in time, you will definitely be able to do it. So some things to know about being an accomplice. The accomplice is not the one who has to actually commit the crime itself. If you're an accomplice to a bank robber, you don't have to be the one that goes in the bank and points the gun and gets the money. In fact, you don't even have to be present at the crime to be an accomplice. The accomplice is held accountable for the other person's actions, and they're held accountable as if they committed the act themselves. So there's the same accountability for that person who goes into the bank and pulls a gun and takes the money as there is for the person that's outside of the bank waiting in the getaway car to help that person escape. They both face equal punishment. They are both held to the same accountability. So there's no crime for accomplice. You're just charged with what we call the principal offense. You're charged with that offense. If you're in the car as the getaway driver, then you are charged not as a getaway driver, you are charged as for robbery. So it's not a separate crime. It is a person who helps in some way for that crime to be committed and completed. Therefore, they are charged with that crime. So let's get into the actus reus of accomplice liability. And what we've learned so far about actus reus as an element is that a person must do an act or failure to do an act. So if the accomplice does not go into the bank and pull the gun and take the money, then therefore they didn't commit that act, how can they be liable for the crime? I've been telling you, if one element is missing, then a crime did not happen. So if that person doesn't commit the actus reus, the element's missing, how can they be guilty of that crime? Because when it comes to accomplice liability, the actus reus is met if some act or conduct by the person contributes to the commission of the crime. That's the actus reus. However they contribute. So the person that is the getaway driver, their actus reus is the contribution of driving away the person who robbed the bank. So the actus reus is different for every crime. And when it comes to accomplice liability, the actus reus is going to be whatever act that person takes to contribute to the commission of the crime. So being present at the scene to assist, that is the actus reus for the accomplice. Provoking someone to commit a crime can be the actus reus for accomplice liability. And just aiding in some way, either physical or psychological. It's contributing in some way. Something that person does or doesn't do that contributes to the commission of that crime is going to satisfy the actus reus for accomplice liability. So, as we know about actus reus, is it's not only an act that someone does, but it can also be the failure to act, the act of omission. So can you think of a situation where not acting would make someone liable as an accomplice? Where somebody did not actually physically do something, and that makes them an accomplice. And as we go through the material, if you haven't answered that question yet, you should be able to answer it by the time we get through all of the material. How to be an accomplice? You can solicit another to commit a crime. And we will look at the crime of solicitation next chapter. You can aid or agree or attempt to aid another in planning or committing a crime. And this gets to the question that I just asked in the previous slide. If somebody has a legal duty to prevent the commission of a crime, but fails to make an effort to do so. So that should help you try to figure out a situation where somebody was supposed to act or should have acted to prevent that crime and they didn't do it. And that failure to act is their actus reus. So let's just do a little exercise right now. Jim asks Ted to shoot his boss and tells him you'll pay him $5,000. What type of accomplice is that? Tom is outside looking for police while Kevin robs a bank. What type of accomplice is that? And finally, a mother knows her friend is abusing her child, but the mother does not do anything to stop it. And what type of accomplice is that? Take just a minute to try to figure out and try to match up the type of accomplice with the action on the left. The first one, Jim asked Ted to shoot his boss and will pay him $5,000. That is soliciting a crime. Tom is outside looking for police while Kevin robs a bank. His act of looking for the police is aiding in committing the crime. And finally, a mother knows her friend is abusing her child, but does not do anything to stop it. That mother has a legal duty to protect their child, and failure to do so would be the actus reus, where there's a legal duty to prevent crime. So hopefully you got all of those right. think it's pretty straightforward. The actus reus is in some way contributing to the commission of a crime. And it could be anything. So there's no list, there's no final list of things or actus reus for accomplice liability, because it could be anything. There's a variety of things that would qualify as the actus reus. So let's consider this. Sue walks into a liquor store as her friend Tom is robbing it. As she walks in, she holds the door open for Tom, making it easier for him to escape. Does that make Sue an accomplice? We have the actus reus, and the actus reus, hopefully you can identify it there. The actus reus is holding the door open, because holding that door open contributed to Tom committing that crime. It made it easier for him to escape. So hopefully you can identify the actus reus there, and it's walking in, it's walking up, and it's opening the door for Tom. But is that enough to make her guilty of being an accomplice? We have the actus reus. What else do we need in order for there to be a crime? We need the mens rea. So what would make Sue liable as an accomplice? What fact can you add in here that would make Sue an accomplice? Because as it reads right now, this does not make Sue an accomplice. We don't have enough information in order to determine if a crime has been committed by Sue. We're missing one thing. We're missing an element. And what element is that? We're missing the mens rea. We don't know if Sue knew that Tom was robbing the bank. If she knew Tom was robbing the bank and then she opened the door for him, now she did that act, the actus reus, she did it with concurrence of the mens rea of wanting him to complete that crime with the guilty intent. So you can see where the actus reus and the mens rea meet up, and they happen at the same time. Take out that mens rea. Sue walks into the liquor store. Tom is robbing it. She holds the door open for Tom, making it easy for him to escape. Sue had no idea what Tom was doing. So when she committed that actus reus of opening the door, she didn't have the mens rea at the time, if she didn't know Tom was robbing the bank. If she knew Tom was robbing the bank and it was her intention to open the door to help him escape, now we have the actus reus and the mens rea in concurrence, and therefore she would be an accomplice to that robbery. So let's look at the mens rea of accomplice liability. What does it require? Not only the act of aiding or assisting in the crime must be present, the actus reus, along with the actus reus must be the mens rea. The guilty mind must be present when that actus reus happens. So what does it mean? It means the person must have acted, committed the actus reus with the purpose of an outcome to the act. So there we have our mens rea. The mens rea requirement for accomplice liability is purpose. Their state of mind, when she opened that door, her purpose, her guilty intent The reason for her opening that door was to help Tom escape. If she didn't know Tom was committing a robbery and she just opened the door, she didn't open the door with the purpose to help Tom. She opened the door just to go into the store. So you can see where the mens rea must be at the same time as the actus rea, and that mens rea is purpose. Doing it with the purpose of an outcome to the act. What is the outcome? The outcome that Tom commit that robbery, is successful in committing that robbery. Let's take a look at some other examples. A store owner sells a gun to someone who he knows is going to shoot someone with it. Is this the mens rea? Is there mens rea there? Yes, there is. Because why did he sell it to him? He knew it. He knew he was going to shoot someone with it. So the act, the actus reus, hopefully you can pick out the actus reus. The actus reus is selling the gun with the purpose that that someone is going to be successful in shooting someone, because he knew that person was going to shoot somebody. If the store owner did not know that the person was going to shoot someone with it, we still have the actus reus of selling the gun, but the mens rea of the purpose of the outcome to be successful is missing, because he doesn't know that the person is going to shoot someone with it. Another example, a pharmacist sells prescription drugs to someone he knows will resell them. So what is the actus reus? The actus reus there is selling the drugs to that person. The actus reus, the act, is selling the drugs. Is the mens rea present when he sells the drugs? And the answer is yes, because he knows the person is going to resell them. Therefore, he acted, he sold the drugs with the purpose of an outcome to the act, and that outcome is for that person to sell the drugs. So this has both the actus rea, selling the drugs, in concurrence with the mens rea of knowing that he will resell it, therefore the purpose is there. A person answers the phone to facilitate an illegal operation, like a bookie, somebody who takes bets. They have somebody answer the phone for them to take the bets. What's the actus reus there? It's the person answering the phone, because answering that phone is an act that contributes to the crime. Does that person know, and do they have, when they answer the phone, is it for the purpose of an outcome to the act? And the outcome of answering the phone is to facilitate an illegal operation. So yes, if that person knows answering the phone is going to facilitate an illegal action, then the mens rea is there. So as we can see, the mens rea and the actus reus must happen at the same time. The actus reus can be a variety of things, but the mens rea is always going to be with purpose and knowing. That's the mens rea. Now, there are some defenses for accomplice liability. For an example, the FBI suspect Tom of being a pedophile. In order to convict him of a crime, they began to send him subscriptions for child pornography magazines. Tom ignored all the mailings for 2 years. Finally, after 2 years, Tom decided to subscribe to the magazines, the child pornography magazines. The FBI then arrested Tom for possession of child pornography. So what is this called? This is called entrapment. The police cannot entrap you into committing a crime. In entrapment, Tom here would be an accomplice to being in possession of child pornography. When he ordered the magazines, that was his actus reus, and he did so with the intent to possess them. So that made him a accomplice liability, but the police entrapped him. And let's look at something where it's different. Tim is a convicted drug dealer. After being out of jail for 2 years, he begins to hang around with other drug dealers. The police suspect him of dealing again. The police send an undercover officer to ask Tim to get him drugs. When Tim does this, the police arrest him. So how is this different? Or is it different? In the first one, the police made efforts to have Tom in possession of child pornography, which is a crime. And in this one, the police made efforts for Tim to deal drugs. So in both of them, the police made efforts for that person to commit a crime. How are these different? They are different. In the first one, Tom had a very good defense for entrapment. In this one, Tim really doesn't have an entrapment defense. So let's look at entrapment and we'll see why. It's because first, the police must induce or encourage the person to commit the crime. Now, the police did that in both of those. They induced and encouraged Tom to buy the child pornography, and they induced or encouraged Tim to sell the drugs. But there's another element. And again, if one element is missing, then a crime didn't happen. One element here of this defense of entrapment is missing, so it would fail. And in the first one, was Tom predisposed to engage in that criminal activity? In other words, did Tom really have a disposition to be in possession of child pornography? And the strong argument is that no, because it took 2 years of the FBI inducing him and encouraging him, where he finally gave in and said, okay, I'll subscribe to it. So it took 2 years. That's really not indicative of a person who is predisposed to commit that crime. If he was predisposed to commit that crime, then he probably would have agreed right away to buy the magazines. Now with Tim selling the drugs, he does not have an entrapment defense because he was predisposed. He was a drug dealer. He went to jail as a drug dealer. When he got out of jail, he started hanging around with drug dealers again. So the police did not plant that idea in his head. And that's what predisposed means. It's whether or not the police plant the idea in somebody's head. They planted it in Tom's head, but it took them 2 years. But with Tim and the drug dealing, they didn't plant that in his head. He was already a drug dealer. So Tim would not have the defense of entrapment. In order to have the defense of entrapment, both of these elements must be there. So in both those situations, why weren't the police guilty of being an accomplice? Why weren't the police guilty of that? And we have what's called the agent provocateur, or sometimes called the feigning accomplice. And that's when somebody goes through the motions but does not want the crime to be completed successfully, such as undercover police officers. This guy on the right here, Jay Dobbins, he was a special agent for the ATF, Federal Agency, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and he went deep undercover with the Hells Angels gang. And he was in there for quite a long time as an undercover agent. And he posed as a Hells Angel. He became a member, and he wrote this book, No Angel. Actually, a really good book. He's a very interesting person, and he was a feigning accomplice, because and it doesn't have to be a police officer. It could be somebody else. It could be actually be a civilian too. So they go through the motions. In other words, they do the actus reus, but they don't want the crime to be committed or completed successfully. So they're not guilty of being an accomplice because they're missing the mens rea of intending the outcome of the crime. The mens rea is wanting or acting with the purpose that that crime be successful, the outcome of the crime. So if the person, whether it's police or somebody else, go through the motions, they complete the actus reus, but they're doing it not because they want the person to commit the crime, then the mens rea is missing and there is no accomplice in that situation. And how far does accomplice liability extend? In other words, what exactly is the accomplice liable for? What criminal responsibility do they have? Is it just for the intended crime? Or are they liable for anything that happens while that intended crime is taking place? We have what's called the natural and probable consequences doctrine. And what this states is that not only is the accomplice liable for the intended crime, but also any reasonably foreseeable offense. So if two people, if the accomplice liability and the only crime that they want to commit happens, but then an additional crime happens as a result of that, if that crime was foreseeable, then the accomplice is going to be held liable for the second crime as well as the first crime. So let's look at some examples to help clear it up for you. Lisa helps Dan plan to rob a bank. She agrees to go in the bank and act as a lookout. When they go in the bank, Dan's ex-wife, whom he hates, is in the bank. He shoots and kills her. Second scenario, Lisa helps Dan plan to rob a bank. She agrees to go in the bank and act as a lookout. So far, exactly the same. When they go in the bank, Dan's ex-wife, who he hates, is in the bank. The ex-wife tries to stop Dan from robbing the bank, and he shoots and kills her when she tries to take the gun from him. So let's break these down one by one. And the first one, what crimes or crime is Lisa liable for? Is she liable for the bank robbery? Well, the actus reus is there. She was at the actus reus. Hopefully you can spot that out, is acting as a lookout. Now, did she have the mens rea when she was acting as a lookout, and yes, she did, because the purpose of her doing that act was to assist Dan in the robbery. So the mens rea was there along with the actus reus. So she's on the hook for the bank robbery. Well, when they go in the bank, Dan's ex-wife is there, whom he hates. He shoots and kills her. Was it foreseeable that Dan's wife, ex-wife, was going to be in there and that he would shoot and kill her? Is that a natural and probable consequence of robbing that bank? And the answer to that is no. Lisa had no idea that, and Dan didn't have any idea that his ex-wife was going to be in the bank. And further, Lisa didn't know that he was going to shoot and kill her. So in that first scenario, she's not on the hook for the shooting of the wife. But let's look at the second one. Now, in this scenario, it's a little different. The ex-wife is there, but now she tries to stop him from robbing the bank. And she tries to take the gun from him, and he shoots and kills her. Is Lisa on the hook for that murder now, as opposed to the first one? And what is the difference? The difference there is that it's foreseeable that somebody would get shot during a bank robbery. Especially, it's certainly foreseeable that someone may try to stop a bank robbery, and if that person tries to do it, that person would get shot. So because that was foreseeable, it was a natural and probable consequence. It was foreseeable that somebody, whoever that somebody is, that somebody may try to stop a bank robbery. Bank robberies are very violent and dangerous situations. So it's very foreseeable that somebody may get shot, especially if a gun is being used. So because it was foreseeable in the second incident, Lisa would be responsible for the murder of the wife as well as the bank robbery. But in the first one, it wasn't foreseeable that she was going to be in there and he was going to shoot and kill her because he hates her. That wasn't foreseeable. That had nothing to do with the bank robbery. The second one, she was shot because of the bank robbery, and that was foreseeable. So Lisa, in the first one, is only on the hook for the bank robbery. In the second one, she's on the hook for the bank robbery, and she's on the hook for shooting the ex-wife, because that, in that situation, was foreseeable because the ex-wife was trying to stop the robbery. Now, let's take a look at the accomplice themselves. We have what's called an innocent agent. If the accomplice is an innocent agent, then he or she is not liable for the crime. And by innocent agent, we mean that the person didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know the act that they were doing was helping in a crime. And some types of innocent agents are insane persons, infants or young child, or somebody under duress. If the accomplice is one of the three above, then there is no liability for the accomplice, but the principal actor is still liable. So what's missing from the insane person, the infant, or the person in duress? What's missing is not the actus reus. So for an example, a drug dealer uses a 12-year-old to, let me correct that, uses a 6-year-old to run his drugs. And the 6-year-old takes the drugs, runs across the street, and delivers the drugs, gets the money, and comes back. Now, the actus reus is there. A young child is, the act is bringing the drugs and taking the money. So the actus reus is there, but what's missing? As we learned about young people is that depending on the age, they, under the eyes of the law, do not have or cannot form the mens rea. So because the mens rea is missing, they're not accomplice to the crime. The mens rea and actus reus must both be present, and they must happen at the same time. Same thing with an insane person. They may not necessarily have the mens rea of the act that they are doing. And that is why these innocent agents are not accomplices, even though they are committing the act. The actus reus is there, but these innocent agents are missing the mens rea. Therefore, they cannot be an accomplice to the crime. And then there's one more way to escape accomplice liability, and that's what we call abandonment. So let's go to one of our scenarios. Let's say where Lisa agrees to help Tom rob the bank. But at some point before the crime is committed, she tells Tom, no, I don't want to do it. I'm out. I'm not going to help you. If the accomplice abandons the agreement prior to the crime, then they're not held liable for the crime. But it must be done prior. Can't be done after. Once the crime is done, that's it. You're on the hook for it. So they must notify either the principal, so Lisa would have to notify Tom, or she could go to the police instead. Instead of notifying Tom, she can go to the police and say, listen, me and this guy had this plan to rob the bank. I don't want to do it anymore. Or she can go to Tom and say, I'm out. You're on your own. I am not going to be your lookout. Both of those would qualify for what we call an abandonment. She abandoned the crime, but it must be prior to the crime being committed, and they must inform somebody, either the other person called the principal, or the police, one of the two. And then the final thing to look at under accomplice liability is, let's say that Sue and Lisa and Tom are arrested for the bank robbery, and Tom is found innocent at his trial. Does that automatically mean that Lisa's going to be found innocent too? If he was found innocent at his trial, that means there was not enough evidence to convict him, and it's the same evidence for Lisa. Should she automatically be found not guilty as well? And the old rule was yes. If Tom was acquitted, then Lisa automatically would be acquitted. However, that has changed. Under today's law, in most jurisdictions, if not all, Lisa could still be held liable even though Tom was found not guilty at trial. So even though the principal was found not guilty at their trial, Lisa now can still be held liable. The old rule was the prosecution would have to dismiss the charge and not go forward with the charges against Lisa because the principal actor was found not guilty. However, the new rule is now the prosecution can still go forward against the accomplice, even though the principal actor was acquitted. So things have changed a little bit in that area. So that's accomplice liability. And it was really our first exercise or exercises in learning what the actus reus is and the mens rea and applying them. It was our first exercises in identifying what the actus reus is, and then learning what the mens rea is, and making sure that both of them happen at the same time. And this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of the semester. For each type of crime that we learn, we're going to be learning what the actus reus is and what the mens rea is. And next chapter, chapter 5, is what we call incomplete crimes, inchoate crimes. And that has to do with conspiracy and attempt crimes. And we'll get into solicitation a little bit more. And in there, when we go over those crimes, we'll again learn the different actus reus and the different mens rea for each one of those crimes. In the meantime, if you have any questions on this material or anything at all, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. We'll see you next time.